Hi folks, and thanks for joining me, Sam, for Thankless Grind's review of the 4th PTR encounter testing session for the upcoming Throne of Thunder raid. Today we'll be taking a look at Jin'rokh The Breaker, the first new encounter players will face once patch 5.2 goes live. Those with a good memory will remember having met Jin'rokh before during Vanilla, when he spent his time as a Zandalari quest giver in Stranglethorn Vale. Having pledged his allegiance to the Thunder King following his reincarnation, however, Jin'rokh and his ability to harness the fury of the storm now guard Li Shen from intruders. Jin'rokh is primarily a DPS check encounter with a soft enrage mechanic that will require players to maximise their damage while moving around the room and dealing with adds correctly. On the pull, a tank should pick up Jin'rokh, and following this, DPS are free to engage him. Bloodlust and cooldowns over 1 minute should be saved, however, as a damage increasing ability is introduced early on in the fight. The first ability that Jin'rokh will use is Static Burst, which deals 100k nature damage to all raid members and applies 10 stacks of Static Wound to the current tank. Static Wound inflicts an additional 18k damage per stack to the tank when struck with a melee, and although these stacks will drop off over time, the slow rate at which this occurs means that 2 tanks are required to keep the damage manageable. Approximately 1 minute into the fight, Jin'rokh will grab the current tank and throw him at one of the 4 statues in the corners of the room. This ability, Thundering Throw, will deal 250k physical damage and stun the tank for 9 seconds. This means the second tank will need to pick up the boss at this time. It is also important to note that any players near where the tank lands will also be hit for 200k nature damage, so make sure to stay away from the area directly in front of the statues. During our attempts at the encounter, we found that Jin'rokh always threw the tank at the statue to the northwest of the room first, allowing the raid to position themselves correctly beforehand. After this ability has been used, the destroyed statue will leak and create a pool of water near the stunned tank's position. This pool will grow in size over time and will function as the main mechanic of the encounter. By standing in the conductive water, players will gain the fluidity buff, granting them 30% increased damage and 40% increased healing, but also increasing nature damage taken by 40%. All raid members should move into the first pool as soon as it spawns and pop DPS cooldowns to maximise the benefit from the damage boost. Melee may need to wait until the pool has grown in size enough for them to DPS and still be able to reach Jin'rokh's hitbox. Active tanks with the static wound debuff should be careful not to stand in the pool, however, as the passive conductivity ability means that all other players in the water will also be hit by the melee swing nature damage. As the pool grows in size, players should attempt to stay near the edge of the water, as this will make handling the adds that Jin'rokh spawns much easier. More about these adds and their abilities a bit later. After the pool has grown to approximately 25% of the room, Jin'rokh will begin casting Lightning Storm. This ability inflicts 55k nature damage every second for 15 seconds to all raid members, but more importantly, causes the pool to become electrified. Electrified waters cause an additional 25k nature damage every second to all players standing within a pool. Add this to the damage from Lightning Storm and the 40% increased nature damage taken, and remaining in a pool after this ability is cast is just not an option. The best way to deal with Lightning Storm damage is for all raid members to stack on a location away from the pools and cycle through raid walls to stay alive. Damage taken outside of this phase should be low if executed correctly, and so raid members should not be afraid to burn defensive cooldowns to aid the healers. Once electrified, a pool remains unusable for the remainder of the encounter, effectively reducing the size of the room by a quarter. Between using these abilities, Jin'rokh will periodically summon a focused lightning orb that will fixate and follow a random ranged player and detonate on contact with them, dealing 150k nature damage to all raid members within 5 yards. While travelling, the orb also pulses for 50k damage every half a second to all players within 5 yards of it, plus an additional 40% if they happen to be inside a pool. Upon detonation, the orb will leave a lightning fissure on the ground which deals 50k nature damage every second to any player within 3 yards of it. The real danger from focused lightning comes from contact with conductive waters or lightning fissures. If an orb detonates on a player inside conductive waters, the 150k nature damage will be dealt to all other raid members inside the pool, and if an orb touches an existing lightning fissure, an implosion will deal 200k damage to all raid members. The tactic is therefore to kite and detonate focused lightning at the edges of the room, taking care not to let it pass over other lightning fissures. While it is also a viable tactic to detonate the orbs just outside of a pool and let the waters remove the lightning fissure as it grows, this will cause an extra 75k nature damage that is completely avoidable by using the edges of the room instead. It is also worth mentioning that if an orb is detonated inside electrified water, 700k nature damage will be dealt to all players within 5 yards, but if executed correctly, the chances of this occurring are almost zero. The sequence of abilities described so far will then begin again and be repeated a further 3 times until the entire room has been filled by electrified waters. At this point, players will no longer be able to avoid the damage from the pools, and it will become impossible to out-heal the damage the raid is taking. Beating this soft enrage is largely dependent on the raid maximising the amount of time the fluidity buff from the pools is active upon them. In summary, Jin'rokh The Breaker feels like a solid first encounter for the Throne of Thunder, with a good balance of tanking, healing and DPSing responsibilities for a raid to take on. On the PTR, the soft enrage seems a little overtuned and the damage taken a little undertuned for a normal raid instance. With a little fine tuning to reduce the pressure on DPS but increase it on healers, I feel Jin'rokh will be a challenging encounter where the mechanics need to be embraced rather than ignored. Until next time, Sam logging off.